right, and without further ado, I want to welcome our first guest and our first keynote speaker for the afternoon session, Donald Sumbry. He is a returning Textilvanian speaker, currently the head of engineering at Upbound, the company behind the open source project Crossplane. Before that, he has a storied 2-decade experience working in platform infrastructure, reliability engineering, and great companies such as Airbnb, Uber, and Twilio. But more important than that, or not sure if more important than that, but he's also a really cool DJ. So I was hoping that he gets us a taste of this art as well, but that's maybe for the after party tonight. If you nicely and kindly ask him, you can see some of his crazy non-engineering skills as well. But in this session, first of all, he'll share with us his insights on how engineering managers can leverage the power of AI to get their engineers to perform at 10x and have more time for fun things as DJing. Please all give a super warm welcome to Sumbry. Thank you so much for joining us here in Cluj.
All right, thanks for having me, everybody. I'm extremely happy to be here. My first time in Romania. And in Cluj as well. You all have been amazing, and I really want to give a shout out to Vlad and the whole crew that helped put this together. This is a great and very well organized event. So I'm going to get things started with talking a little bit about how engineering managers can 10x their performance with ChatGPT. ChatGPT is, the hotness right now. Everybody's talking about it. But I feel like they're talking about it so much that we're all still kind of scrambling to figure out what do we actually use it for and where is it useful. So we're going to try to dive into that today. All right, so a quick agenda. We're going to start off with a management primer. So we'll cover briefly what does a good manager do, and how can ChatGPT fit into that world. Then we'll jump into GPT itself, and I'm going to attempt to do a live demo, so let's hope the demo gremlins are going to be nice to me today. And then we'll talk about what this means for the future of management. Does this mean that engineering managers are going to ultimately be replaced? Hint, the answer is no. I'm kind of giving you a spoiler alert, but we'll sort of dive into why that's the case. And so I'm going to start off with a story about how I got into management myself. And if you're a manager or an up-and-coming manager, you're always going to get asked this question, why did you get into management? And there is a wrong answer for this. Being a good manager is being selfless. It's all about the people. It's all about doing whatever it takes to enable your teams to execute well. And so there's a selflessness to it. And if you got into management because, you wanted to be, center stage and, calling all the shots and whatnot, this is a wrong answer, and this is probably not the field for you. It's all about your teams and your people. A really good manager, you're not going to even notice that they're there. You're just going to look at the output of their team, and it's going to be amazing. And you're going to be like, wow, this is a really high-performing team. How did they get like that? So about 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was actually at Airbnb, and I made the decision to leave. Airbnb was a great company, and I made the decision to leave Airbnb and to join a startup. The startup's name is Upbound. Again, they're behind the open source project Crossplane. We're under 100 people, and Upbound is actually my 7th startup. So it was quite a bit of a shift jumping from a 10,000 person company to a 100-person company. But I'd done a bunch of startups my whole career, so not too crazy. And so my very first goal was to hire engineering managers and really start to build up the team. And one day, we're all just talking, and I suddenly discovered, just randomly, that all of us were using ChatGPT every day. So I'm curious how many of you out there use GPT daily? Okay, great. It should be everybody. Because this is a very useful tool that we can all leverage. So now let's jump quickly into the management primer, right? And so again, a manager is really, really about execution and delivery and getting a group of people to march in the same direction, and deliver results. And oftentimes, a really good team, their output will be much bigger than the sum of all the individuals. So you kind of get that multiplier effect. Really good engineering manager, is going to oversee project execution and delivery, facilitate communication, create a safe environment, nurtures and grows their engineers, and then really comes with the toolbox. They're going to leverage frameworks to really drive change, and a really good seasoned manager is going to show up on day one with that sort of already in place. So one of these frameworks is something called the 3 Ps. And if you've seen me talk before, I've actually touched on 2 of these Ps already. This is a simple framework. It's a way of looking at a situation and quickly categorizing it or scoping it into, is it a people thing, is it a process thing, or is it a product thing? I've actually talked about the people aspect before. This was on a previous slide in another presentation, and it was really about like building teams and all the different roles and how you got a group of people to work really, really well together. I also talked about product previously. If you remember the title of this talk, it was If You Build It, They Might Come. And it was all about like the rapid iteration cycle, especially at a startup where you wanted to quickly build something, give it to customers, measure the results, learn, take away a learning, and then, iterate on the next version and keep repeating that. And when you're a startup, you want to be extremely fast and extremely agile. This is how you outperform all the big companies. But process, I actually never covered process, and I've never really dove into process before, and so that's basically what we're going to be doing today. And so what is process? In a very simple terms, it's a systematic sequence of tasks or activities that convert inputs to outputs. That's it. And so if an engineering manager's job is to sort of drive execution and delivery, the way that they're going to do that is through processes that they deploy and then they leverage and that they get everyone to use. So now let's introduce ChatGPT into the story. So I think of ChatGPT as a process accelerator. Again, it is just a tool. It's not magic. Maybe it is magic. I don't actually understand how it works under the hood. But at the end of the day, it's just a tool that we use. I'm pretty sure everyone in here is familiar with GPT, so I'm basically going to skip this slide. But one of the things I really want to double down on is this whole notion of prompt engineering. And it's basically like development in my mind. ChatGPT doesn't just work automatically. You've actually got to get really, really good at telling it exactly what you want it to do and exactly what you're looking for. And then it's an iterative process. You're not going to get the thing that you want on the first try, so you sort of need to keep iterating through results, just like software development, until you actually get the output that you want. So this is a very simple prompt structure that I kind of logically use in my head. I don't think there's any right answer for how you generate prompts, as long as you're doing it in a structured way. And very simply, I always start out with the who I am or the persona, the what I'm trying to accomplish or do, the context, the why I'm actually trying to do that. And then I basically tell GPT the artifact that I want it to produce and the format that I want it in. Very, very simple. You can read tons of information on the internet about more complex prompt engineering. I don't actually think it's that complex. Again, it's just all about structure, and talking to the conversational AI. So with that said, we're going to move to the crazy part of this, which is the live demo. And we're going to actually use ChatGPT Live. And so I've gone ahead and, in the spirit of engineering management, engineering managers are really about what I call the people development life cycle. And it's basically this whole string of things from onboarding to offboarding and everything in between. And it's all around the development of people and engineers on an engineering team. So I started off with a simple prompt. I basically told GPT I'm an engineering manager, the size of my company, what my company does, what I'm responsible for, and that I told it I want a summary of a typical people development life cycle and what that might look like. And so it actually gave me a very, very long answer, but it starts out essentially with the different stages: recruitment and hiring, onboarding, performance management, et cetera, et cetera. And so I was like, wow, this is a pretty good, first answer. And then it actually, because I gave it the context that I was a SaaS company, it actually went a little bit further, which I didn't expect the first time I did this, because then it actually started saying, okay, well, you actually specifically about recruiting, this is what you should do, specifically about onboarding, this is what you might do, et cetera. And then it kind of dove into another level of detail. So this was great, and I'm like, this is a good starting point, but sort of what next? If I'm an engineering manager and I'm developing these processes, maybe there's something I want to focus on specifically. And so, I'm going to start by just, answering GPT. That was great, And by the way, I am always nice to AIs. If they ever decide to kill us one day, like, I'm going to say I was always on your side. So here we go. So I'm telling GPT that was great. I'd like to dive into another area in more detail. Can we talk about onboarding plans and what that might look like for a new employee for the first 90 days? Now, I don't know if you're like me, but a lot of times being an engineering manager and writing processes is essentially like being an author and writing a book, right? And you can get writer's block. You can't sit down to try to do something, come up with the process, write a review, decide what you're going to talk about in one-on-ones, and then essentially get stuck. And so the nice thing here is I've basically asked GPT to dive a little bit deeper into this specific area, and then it's actually going through and saying, okay, and it's spitting out like an onboarding plan. Now, I think we all know the way these LLMs are trained. And so the interesting thing is, on some level, I kind of feel like it's been stealing things that I've done in the past that have been published on the internet, or regurgitated by others, et cetera. And I think that's okay. I think that's like the ultimate expression of open source, where there's all this stuff that's out there in the wild, and GPT basically gives you access to all of it. So again, we have this great onboarding plan. I could dive into it in more detail if I wanted, but you sort of get the gist of that. So now with that said, I'm like, okay, great. I've got this great onboarding plan. Maybe I want to dive into something more specific about, our first one-on-one. That was great. My new employee, Sumbry, is starting tomorrow. What should we talk about in our first one-on-one? And again, gets past the writer's block. GPT, it's taking a little while to think. And I love how polite it is sometimes. Thanks for congratulating me on the hire. But again, starting off with like a welcome and a check-in, clarifying the role and, what they're going to be doing, et cetera. And by the way, I think I'm running some expensive queries, a little bit slow today. Talking about company culture and value, these are actually all great things to be talking about with an engineer on their first day. And in a sense, GPT is sort of reminding me of all of this stuff. And so what I'll often do is I'll take its output, I'll dump it in a Google Doc, and then I'll sort of massage it and change it for exactly how I want to consume it. So we've talked a little bit about the people development lifecycle. Let's jump on to another area. And one thing that's popular here is, engineering ladders or engineering rubrics. And I'm going to demonstrate this one because this is when GPT actually made a mistake, right? And so I have the same prompt that I used before. And I'm basically asking it, I've got this small company. I want to create a career development ladder. And so GPT is like, great, okay, I'm going to give you this ladder. It's going to start out with 5 levels. You're going to have a junior engineer, an engineer, a senior engineer, a lead engineer, and then an engineering manager. And I'm like, great, wait. Why is the engineering manager on this rubric, right? And I don't know if most of you know, but this is what rubrics at engineering companies looked like maybe 20 years ago. You had one ladder. If you wanted to progress past a certain level at a company, you basically had to be a manager. And Google was the company that popularized having 2 ladders, one for managers and one for individual contributors. So GPT is kind of stuck in the past with what it recommended here. So now I'm going to actually, I got to get GPT to fix that. Okay, that was not quite right. You combine the manager and engineer ladders together. Oops. I'd like them separately. And so kind of gave it a quick correction, and let's see if what GPT does. And so the first thing it does is it corrects this. Now it's saying, oh, okay, I'm just going to give you an engineer ladder. And it's going to split them into IC roles and manager roles. So now we're getting the junior engineer, the senior engineer. And the nice thing with this prompt that I actually asked for is I told it to give me 3 bullet points about what someone at this level might do. And then I also asked it for an example. And a lot of times when I see folks develop engineering rubrics, they don't really provide examples, like demonstrating like what it is to actually showcase the skill set. And so engineers then treat the rubric like a checklist, basically. And they're like, look, I did all these things. I'm ready to get promoted. And so, providing more context as you're producing this can be really great. Now, the great thing here is GPT went a little bit further. I only wanted the engineering rubric, but it actually gave me the management rubric as well. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it. But one of the things that we see here is that it's now added a senior engineer level, a staff engineer level, and then a principal engineer level as well. So now I've got the starting or the basics of an engineering rubric for my company. And I can also give it more specific instructions, like maybe I only want 3 levels. Maybe I want to add tenure and experience to these levels as well, and GPT will happily spit that out for me. So the next process we're going to jump into is incident management. And again, every company has an incident management program, and it's generally, how you deal with outages on production systems, et cetera. So I've asked GPT, hey, you know what? I want to make sure my reliable widgets SaaS service is running well. Can you create an incident management plan for me? And then it's actually doing that. And so the interesting thing here is, again, with the prompt, it tells me, about all the different sections that I need to define and cover in my incident management plan. Then it actually tells me how to roll these out as well. And like sort of the different sections here as well. So this is a lot, and I actually want to only focus on incident response. So again, that was great, GPT, but I'd like to just focus on incident response. Can you give me a simple incident response process, limit to bullet points and a few words or phrases? Please go fast. I'm in a live demo. Actually, it looks like it is going a little bit faster. And so, again, GPT is, here's a simplified incident process. It's covering all the phases from detection, assessment, escalation, containment, investigation, resolution, communication, et cetera, et cetera. So again, GPT has gone out to the collective internet, it's grabbed all this knowledge, and it's spit out like a very simple incident process. And then I can continue diving into this and expanding on this a bit more as well. So again, that was great. What about the different incident roles that I'll need? Can you expand? And so let's see what it says. So now we're getting into, again, more of the specifics. And when you're an engineering manager, again, it's about like that structure and those processes that you're creating for the rest of the team. If folks don't know what they're supposed to do or their roles or, the expectations set forward, you're kind of not doing your job. And so GPT, again, is really helping me to kind of put some scaffolding in place to define all these roles, to define all these processes. And so in this case, it's called out everything from an on-call engineer as a role and what they're expected to do to a customer support lead, and you might interact with them during an outage and need to communicate the effect of that to customers, et cetera. And so the last thing that I'm going to cover is this one we're going to kind of do off the cuff, and I've got 6 minutes left, so I'm going to go through this quickly. And so again, I've given it a simple prompt, but this time I've basically told it, that I'm doing a live demo. I've given it the prompt for a small company, and then what I'm now going to do is I'm going to say, okay, great. I have a team of 10 people that have taken personality tests. It was Myers-Briggs, and 5 people scored ESTJ, and 5 scored ESTP. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this team? Now, this one's interesting because I'm actually giving it like a real-world scenario, and I'm basically giving it scores of a personality test, and I'm asking it, based on this info, like, how is this team likely to perform? And so GPT is now going through, and it's literally telling me, hey, this is where I think your team will be strong, and these are the areas that I think, they might be weak. And so the interesting thing here is with Myers-Briggs, It's starting off by telling me the different types. So ESTJ is known as like a provider in Myers-Briggs. And then ESTP is known as a teacher in Myers-Briggs. And so letting me know like these weaknesses, I can kind of quickly see like how I might have some challenges on this team. And when you're an engineering manager and you're designing a team, you really sort of want to be conscious of that. Like how well is the team going to work together? Do I need to move folks around? It's kind of like having like a football team or a basketball team. You're developing a strategy and you're developing a cohesive strategy for the entire team. So now here's its summary, which is great. Hey, my team as composed will likely excel in situations that require practical problem solving, directness, and quick action. Great. But the challenges may arise in areas requiring emotional understanding. And that's specifically why I put up this example, because I actually think this is something we run into a lot, where we sort of built these engineering teams that are great at execution, but have no EQ and no empathy and don't really understand like what customers are actually going through. And it's something that I've always got that's top of mind for me, when I'm developing a team, is making sure, I've truly got a diverse team that has a mix of all these different perspectives and personality types. So with that said, let's go on. And thankfully the live demo worked, so I'm happy for the demo gremlins. And so we already went over the generic prompt. So now, a future without managers. Like I just did all this work. I've basically been telling GPT all of this stuff. Does this mean it's going to be able to replace me? And guess what? The answer is no, it's not. And why is that? Because ChatGPT is dumb. It's dumb. You may have noticed during all of that I was doing a lot of the work and the heavy lifting. I was using my more than 20 years of experience in the industry and all my time as a manager to basically give GPT more context and craft the responses to things that I knew were likely to work much better. And so GPT just doesn't have like that experience that I have. And I don't think that's going to be replaced anytime soon. Now, the thing GPT is really good at is the simple stuff, sort of the basic stuff. And in a way, I always think of this as like the non-differentiated value. Every company has an incident management plan. Every company has an onboarding plan. There's all these things that are standard across companies, yet we hire sort of people to come in and recreate these things over and over and over. And that is the type of stuff that's going to be replaced. That is the type of stuff that GPT excels at and that we really, really, really need to double down on. I sort of talked about prompt engineering being this iterative process. Again, in the same way that I don't think we're going to replace engineers today, as good as Copilot and other technologies like that are, it's still a ways off. And if you're a Copilot user, for example, and you've got a certain amount of industry experience, you'll end up fighting with it more than it actually helps you. And that is just the reality of where the technology is today. That may not always be true. But the other thing about GPT is it's a hammer. It is not a multi-tool. Don't try to use it for everything. Figure out what it's good for. I've given you some of these process examples today. It's good for a lot of other things, but don't try to use it for everything. I sort of cringed when I was reading something online and someone was like, hey, GPT is bad at math. I'm like, I'm not asking it to do math. Like, I'm going to use a calculator if I need to add some things together. Like, again, it's sort of the wrong tool for the job. And so I struggle with the fact that sometimes we call this general AI, but the reality is it's not general, and you cannot use it for everything yet. And the importance with any tool is understanding exactly, when you're going to use that tool. And so I always like to think of GPT, you leverage it when you're doing sort of repeatable structural work. These are like the types of tasks that you may have done at different companies, or you sort of do over and over and over again. They don't really change that much. Maybe some of the details and things like that do, in subsequent iterations. But those types of things are always good candidates for, leveraging ChatGPT with. And you really should think of it as an efficiency play and a multiplier. In the past, when I was like doing something like writing an engineering rubric, it might take me weeks, right? To kind of, start over again, identify the levels, start pulling in, all the descriptions and examples and things like that. Now I can do that in like an hour. So I've suddenly eliminated weeks worth of work, and this allows me to focus again on providing more differentiated value for the company. So in summary, GPT can accelerate repeatable structural work, but it's an iterative development process, and you have to approach it like that. You have to know when to use it, and great managers, for great managers, GPT is just going to be another tool in the toolbox. Managers should be tool collectors, just like engineers are tool collectors, and it's just something else that you leverage that allows you to be more efficient. So with that said, thanks everybody. Really enjoyed this.